Hello everybody, and welcome back to the third part of our four-part music appreciation series presented by the Northern Neck Orchestra. My name is Michael Repper, and I'm the music director of the Northern Neck Orchestra of Virginia, and I'm very proud to be the host of this series. In our last video, we discussed the form structure of a fugue and the many-voiced polyphonic texture prevalent in Bach's writing. Today, we're shifting further along in the 18th century and talking about the music of Mozart, who was born just 6 years after Bach's death. Art was transforming in all realms during Mozart's time. Visually, the neoclassical era was beginning to take shape and emphasizing symmetry, order, realism, and in some cases, simplicity. For historical context and to see Mozart's music in a time frame we can understand, Mozart was writing his music during the time of the American Revolution. Take a look at one of the more famous neoclassical pieces of art, The Death of Socrates by Jacques David. Note the immense difference in the visual art we see now relative to the artwork from 100 years ago, as we discussed in the previous videos. Humans are drawn extremely realistically, and color differences are much more vibrant. It's very approachable. Musically, Mozart's music is very similar. Listen to the tune I was playing at the beginning of this episode, which is a piece of music with which anyone who has had a young piano student will be familiar. Many of them probably play it a little bit better than I do as well. It's Mozart's infamous piano sonata in C major K, 545. You'll notice an immediate texture difference between the Baroque style, the polyphonic fugal texture that we were talking about, where we now have one predominant melody supported by a less prominent harmony. The melody is very approachable, and the harmony is less complex. Take a listen. These are trademarks of the classical style in music, the classical era style in music, and this was the style of writing through Mozart's time, through Haydn's time, and a significant amount of Beethoven's time, and for most composers writing between 1750 and about 1820. As I said in the first episode, I'm often asked, how should I know what's coming? How can I know how long a piece will be? Well, by knowing a piece's form or how it's structured, it can be easier to approach music. And the good news is that in Mozart's time, music was very predictable in terms of its form. So, like we broke apart the fugue in the last episode, and we talked about how you can identify a fugue and how you can follow along with the fugue, I'd like to discuss the form of a sonata today, because it's one of the most influential forms of music around, and it's still being used today. You can hear this musical structure in sonatas, in symphonies, and much more. And I hope by the end of the episode, you'll have an idea of what to listen to when someone plays a sonata or a symphony for you. You might find it easier to follow along. Now remember how a fugue had one subject, which every voice repeated and developed upon. Well, in a typical sonata form, we'll have actually two distinct subjects, or two distinct themes. You might think of these as the two lead characters of a play, a story, or a movie. They're recognizable, distinct, and they can each be developed independently. In a sonata, we will hear the first subject or theme right at the beginning. Take a listen, again, from the Mozart K545. This is the first theme. And then we'll hear the second subject, or second theme. It has a different idea. Now, played together, the second theme after the first theme, along with a mild amount of development, or maybe a little closing theme, they make up what is called the exposition of a sonata. Remember the term exposition of a fugue being the first part of the fugue? Well, it's the same thing in a sonata. Think of the exposition as the first several chapters of a novel. You're introduced to the characters, you learn their traits, you learn to recognize them, and you're all set up for the meat of the story. All right, I'll play for you the entire exposition of this sonata. It's going to be the first theme, followed by the second theme. Now, after the exposition, you'll hear a section that's called the development, which is exactly what it sounds like. Think of the development as the section of the novel where your characters might get into conflict. They might be intense, love affairs or some other, mystical thing that happens in the development of a novel or the middle part of a piece. There might be intense character development, or the themes introduced in the first few chapters are expanded upon in some way. Now, the same thing happens in music. Take a listen to the development from this sonata. Forgive my little errors here and there. But wow, it's very, very different from the opening. The first thing you'll notice is that Mozart immediately shifts into a minor or sad-sounding key, like this. It's all based on the minor. Not the major, but the minor. Here's how it would sound if he continued in major. Okay, but he immediately shifts it into a minor key. It's the same sort of theme that we're familiar with from the exposition, but he changes it up immediately. And just like that, it's in minor. And the other main thing that you'll hear in the development is that Mozart is playing with or developing several of the themes that he introduced in the exposition. Do you remember this one? Okay. As I just said, you're going to hear that in the development. But in a different key. And you remember this one too. Well, in the development, instead of arpeggios, which are skipping notes, he changes it to scales, okay? Sounds like this. Right? That's the same idea, but instead it's done in a sort of scalar motion by step rather than by leap. Now, this is a short piece, so there's not a tremendous amount of development, but it's the same format that Beethoven used in his symphonies, for example, so you can have very, very long developments. But you can think of this section as the part of the story where your main characters come across conflict and they must resolve it. And resolve it they do, because as it is in Mozart, you eventually arrive at the recap of the original themes. Look how the development section simply fades away into the simple themes that we remember. I'll play from the start of the development, and you'll hear how it fades right back into the themes that we know. Back to what you're familiar with. Now, this closing section of the sonata that comes right after the development, we call the recap, or if you're fancy, recapitulation, but we can just use recap. This is exactly what it sounds like. Our themes or characters have found their resolution, and we're going to recap them. We're going to hear them again. I'll play the entire recap, and you can hear both themes that you're familiar with as Mozart brings the piece to a close. So you get the three parts of the sonata. You have the entire structure. You have from the exposition into the development and then the recap. So I'm going to play the entire sonata. It's not very long, but you hear, try to follow along with the structure. And once you memorize the structure, you'll know it for everything, as we'll prove in just a minute. Enjoy. As a special treat, I'm going to welcome a friend and violinist in the Northern Neck Orchestra, Adelya Lindsay, to play another famous classical sonata, Beethoven's Spring Sonata for violin and piano. Before I do that, I'll briefly introduce the themes to you so you know what to listen for, because it follows the exact same structure. Here's the first theme of the sonata. Okay, so you know what to listen for. And here is the second theme. So listen carefully as we play how you hear the first theme, then the second theme as we get to know characters in the book. Then the characters will go through a series of developments where the themes are altered or changed in creative ways by Beethoven. Then they'll emerge into a calm recap. You'll also hear a coda, which we discussed in the last video. And this is the area at the end of the movement where not all tension has been quite resolved, and so the composer must add some extra music to make the piece come to a firm conclusion. Beethoven was known for his lengthy codas. In fact, in his Fifth Symphony, first movement, the coda is actually longer than the entire exposition. It's kind of fascinating how he did that. After our performance of Beethoven, this episode will come to a conclusion. I hope you'll join us for the fourth and final installment of our music appreciation series, where we'll discuss Romantic era music. For now, I'd like to welcome Adelya Lindsay to play Beethoven's Spring Sonata. Enjoy.